Hello and welcome back to more High Peak. Well, today I thought we'd do a bit of a buyer's guide on the Land Rover Range Rover. As you'll see behind me is a Range Rover from every single era, starting with the old Classic all the way up to the brand new L460. What we're going to do then is spend a few minutes looking around each car and I'll tell you all the things you need to know about. Starting with this. Now this is the OG, this is the original Range Rover. This ran from the late 70s all the way to 1995. Although this is a late one from 1992, this is what really gave Range Rover the name. This is what put them on the map. In typical British fashion, they ran this model for about 25 years until it became so long in the tooth, the new model was well overdue. But nevertheless, it cemented itself in British automotive history. The whole point of the original Range Rover was to create a more luxurious Land Rover. Basically a more luxurious Land Rover that the farmer could use at the weekend. That's what the whole Range Rover idea was. Some people will no doubt disagree with me, but the Range Rover really created the luxury SUV segment. This is really the car that started it all. Back then there was nothing like this out there. So you got something that was really capable off-road, but also something that was nice and luxurious to be in. It's hard to imagine now, but back then, especially in the UK, nobody was doing that. This particular model's a 3.9 litre V8, but they did also offer it as a diesel. Early models used a smaller 3.5 litre V8, but that wasn't as reliable. They relied on a carburettor rather than fuel injection. If you're looking to buy one of these today, you're going to have to spend around £10,000 to get yourself a decent one. But to be honest with you, because they're so old and antiquated, it isn't the kind of thing that you'd want to use on a daily basis. Think of this more as a Sunday morning car. If you're looking to buy one of these here in the UK, the biggest thing to watch for is rust. Back when I bought this, well, there wasn't much left of it at all. It had holes in the floor like a Flintstones car. The other issue you'll probably face is a sagging headliner. In addition to that, they can have engine issues, gearbox issues, transfer box issues. They can suffer with dodgy electronics, coolant issues. It is a long list, but then it's a 35-year-old car. But the biggest thing to watch out for is rust, so do have a poke and prod around. In terms of interior then, they are quite basic. I mean, this is a Vogue spec, so it's quite a high spec, and you don't get air conditioning, you don't get much really. That model ran until 1995, but in 1994 they launched the P38. Now the P38 was a huge leap forward in terms of luxury, technology, and sadly not reliability. This, I believe, is when Range Rover really stepped up a gear in terms of brand appeal and brand awareness. This is really when you started to see celebrities buying them, and all of a sudden it became more of a status symbol. And that's an idea that Land Rover have taken and just ran with every single model afterwards. I mean, you often forget that Land Rover wasn't always a luxury brand. Now of course it is, but back then it wasn't. The P38 was the first clear shift towards luxury over utility. With the P38, they turned the old agricultural Range Rover into something really luxurious. So you got a much nicer interior with piped leather. You got heated seats, sunroof, cruise control, air conditioning, sat-nav, air suspension. It came with everything. I know styling's subjective, but I think the P38 looks a whole lot better. It's way more modern. The whole design looks much more sleek and contemporary. In terms of engines available, there were several to choose from. So you could have gone with a 2.5 litre turbo diesel, which was supplied by BMW, or you could have gone with a 4 litre V8, which was derived from the old 3.9, that produced about 190 horsepower, or the 4.6 litre V8 with about 230 horsepower. Now I know I touched on reliability, but sadly the P38 is known to be one of the most unreliable Range Rovers ever built. It suffered with a whole host of issues, from electrical gremlins to massive engine failure. The V8 suffered with blown head gaskets and liner issues. They just weren't great. But nevertheless, I love them and always have. When I was a kid growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, this was the one that I always wanted. The P38 was just the car to have. Again, a bit like the Classic though, they're a bit too old and too unreliable to want to use one as a daily car. If you're looking to buy one of these, you can pick them up from as little as £2,000, but I'd advise against it. That's what I did with this one. I paid £2,500 for it, but it's going to cost me another couple of grand to get it right. I'd recommend you spend somewhere between 5 and 7 to get yourself a nice one. As I've mentioned then, you can't really use either of those on a daily basis because they're just too old, but they do make great weekend cars and certainly collector vehicles. Prices of both those are on the rise. If you're looking for a Range Rover to use on a daily basis, then the best one in terms of value has got to be the L322. This one's it's funny that it's in the middle actually of this run because it's kind of the best. The L322 ran from 2002 until 2012. It was created back when BMW owned Land Rover, and they spent hundreds of millions developing that car. And it really shows. That car's a 2002 and it still drives like a modern car. You can pick these up for as little as £1,000. Again, I wouldn't advise you do that though. You're best off spending maybe maybe £6,000 to get yourself a nice one. I'd recommend you go for a Vogue spec and it will have everything on it that you could possibly desire. In case you're wondering, the Vogue starts with the SE, then the HSE, and then the Vogue. This is a pre-facelift L322 which ran from 2002 until 2005. These are available with a 4.4 litre V8 or a 3 litre straight 6 turbo diesel. Both can have their issues, but if you find a well-maintained one, then you should be okay. But that's not to say you won't have any issues, because a bit like the P38 and the Classic, they're not known for the reliability. If you are thinking about buying a used Range Rover, make sure you do a thorough vehicle history check first. I always use CarVertical. I'll leave the link below in the video description, but it's really easy to use. All you do is go to carvertical.com and type in the reg or the VIN. Once you type in the reg or the VIN, it produces a really thorough, detailed report. So it checks database in 35 different countries. It'll tell you if it's ever been stolen, written off, had a mileage rollback, or has outstanding finance on it. In addition to that, it shows you the ownership changes, the reg plate changes, the spec, the average market value, the MOT history, and a whole lot more. If you want to do these checks for yourself, and I urge you to do so before you hand over any cash for a used car or motorbike, there are just so many dodgy cars out there, don't end up buying one. Make sure you use my promo code HIGHPEAK, that's HIGHPEAK all one word, HIGHPEAK, for 20% off each and every check that you do. And you can use that promo code as many times as you like. So yeah, thanks CarVertical for sponsoring today's video. Right, back to the Range Rovers. If you're after an L322, my pick would be to go for a facelift from like 2007, 2009, and I'd probably go for a 3.6 litre turbo diesel V8. That offers the best of both worlds. You get decent performance at 270 odd horsepower and decent miles per gallon. Insurance and tax aren't bad on those either, especially the pre-facelift. Speaking of costly insurance, let's move on to the next one. Now the next one is the L405 Range Rover. This one replaced the L322. So the L405 debuted in 2012 and it ran until 2022. Again, the L405 was a huge improvement over the L322. But for the first time ever, the L405 really focused on luxury rather than off-road capability. That's not to say the L405 is bad off-road, because it really isn't, but the focus was more about luxury than, getting muddy. If you go for an autobiography spec, it really has everything, even things like massaging seats. Prices for the L405 start at around £12,000, which is a proper bargain, but be warned. I'd spend maybe double that and get yourself a nice one. A facelift example from 2017 or 18 onwards. Engines available in the L405 started with a 3 litre turbo diesel V6, which wasn't known for its reliability. Then there was a 4.4 litre turbo diesel V8, there was a 3 litre supercharged petrol, or a 5 litre supercharged petrol. Now, the pick of the bunch really has got to be the 5 litre supercharged. It produces 525 brake horsepower, so it's properly quick. If you compare that to the range-topping 4.4 V8 in the L322, that produces about half that. So there's just no comparison really. That's what makes me say the focus on the L405 was more about how it handled on-road rather than off it. In terms of reliability, then to be fair, I've never had any issues with that, and that's the third L405 I've had. I had a blown turbo on the first one that I had that would have cost me £2,000 or £3,000 without a Land Rover warranty, so that's something to check for. The 5 litre supercharge can suffer with dodgy timing chains, so that's something to look for. You might get some electrical gremlins as well. And something that plagues every single era of Range Rover, barring the blue one because it doesn't have it but it was an option, is air suspension. If you ever see them sagging on one side and listing, it's a sign that the airbags are on the way out or have blown completely. And sadly, you're looking around £1,000 a corner to replace the airbags, so it's quite a costly job. This is why so many of these cars get scrapped. I mean, take that L322 for example that I bought for just 1,200 quid. If something went wrong on that, most people would just scrap it rather than fix it. The latest evolution of Range Rover then comes in the form of the L460. Now this came out in 2022 and it really is, well, they've really stepped it up a gear yet again. But again, a bit like the L405, the focus is all about luxury rather than getting dirty. Now the interior on the L460 is something else. It's almost like being in a Bentley. Everything's trimmed in the finest, softest leather. It's got massaging seats, heated seats, cooled seats, heated steering wheel, 360 camera. It's got everything that you could possibly wish for. But in my opinion, they've kind of gone too far with it. I always say this to people, but the L405 and the L460 are far better cars. But the L322 is the best Range Rover. This is the thing actually, no farmer's going to drive around in an L460 or an L405, it just doesn't make sense. Until Bentley released the Bentayga and Rolls-Royce released the Cullinan, the best luxurious 4x4 you could buy was the Range Rover. But now they're on the scene, I don't know, it's got some stiff competition. The L460 is available with various engines as well. Diesels, petrols, plug-in hybrids, there is something for everyone. This particular one is the P550E, so it uses a 3 litre straight 6 petrol, along with an electric motor and batteries and stuff, so it gives you about 50 miles of pure EV range. One word of warning though, the insurance is ridiculously expensive on both the L460 and the L405. That's because there was a spate of robberies over the last 24-36 months. People were stealing Range Rovers for fun, they were just that easy to break into. Since then there have been software upgrades on both models, so it's not so much of an issue, but still, insurance prices haven't come back down in line with that. Used prices here in the UK for the L460 start at around £70,000, but if you buy a brand new one, then it'll cost you double that. And that's an interesting point really. If you look at the old 1992 Range Rover, with inflation, that cost the equivalent of £38,000. Now all of a sudden the current model is £140,000. It seems like they've lost their original audience, but with the L460, they found a new one. Right, let's try and summarise each generation. The L460 is the most luxurious, the L405 is the best looking, the L322 is the best Range Rover, the P38, I was going to say the most unreliable, we're trying to stay positive, aren't we? So I'm going to say the classiest. Then you've got the Classic, which is just iconic. So there we go, a quick look at each generation of Range Rover. Let me know in the comments below which one's your favourite. I think mine's got to be the L322, but let me know your thoughts below. Anyway, thank you once again for watching. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and TikTok. I'll leave the links below. And yeah, cheers guys. I'll see you next time.